Hey kids, howdy, and welcome to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. It is the final day of March. It's March 31st, which means tomorrow it will be April, and March is in our rear view mirror. Truly one of the more difficult months of the year.
So we're letting up now?
Well, yeah, I mean, yesterday, Neptune moving into Aries, we're going to see results of that ingress on the world stage over the next week or two, because that always happens when an outer planet changes signs. And we're 30 seconds after that, so who knows what the next week or two will bring. And though we are no longer in eclipse season, we are in a lunar cycle that was generated by an eclipse. So that does make the whole 4 weeks of this lunar cycle a little bit extra just from the eclipse energy. In fact, my teacher, Stephanie Azaria, who first introduced me to the idea of calling it a wormhole, she would consider this whole lunar cycle to be part of the wormhole itself, whereas my embodied experience has always been that the time in between eclipses are just like a wild ride, and then it does lighten up. So I don't call it a wormhole the way Stephanie did, but make no mistake about it. It's a less intense month than March, but we're in a momentum of energy that's building towards the summer that I'm calling the hot, what do we call it? The sort of hot summer mess? I don't know what I'm calling it, but it's, the summer's going to be a bit intensified, and it really in some ways began with Neptune moving into Aries. Before I answer this week's question, I have two quick announcements. One is that it's the first Thursday of the month this Thursday, because we're in April starting tomorrow, and that's when I do my global healing meditation. Thursday night, 7 p.m. Pacific. It's absolutely free. The Zoom link is everywhere on social media, but if you're not on my mailing list, go to michaellenx.com and join it, because then you get the announcement with the Zoom link and the recording if you can't be there live. Getting it emailed to you is the only way to access the recording. I'm also starting up my next class Saturday the 12th. So not this Saturday, but next Saturday is my Diving into the Shadow class. This is my foundational shadow work class, so it's perfect for somebody who's new to this kind of work, where you take a look at ways in which your inner sort of constrictions show up as projections in the world. And when you learn how to work with what's triggering you on the inside, you can develop a lot more grace in meeting the world on its own terms. So what a perfect time to do a little work when the world is falling apart. And if you perceive the frightening landscape through the lens of your own wounds and fears and disowned material, you're going to suffer. So if shadow work is new to you, this class is perfect. And if you just want a re-up and a commitment to making sure that you're orienting yourself in life to do this kind of work, check out my class, Diving into the Shadow.
I remember you saying at the beginning of the year, it's like the top of the year is really time to honor your spiritual practice.
Yes.
And focus on that, and everything will come. So I feel like this is really one of those opportunities.
Yeah, really, truly, because how we see the world is how we are, not how the world is.
Right.
And it's frightening. I'm not going to pull punches about that. It's a fucking terrifying landscape out there. So if you've got wounds of fears and inadequacies that you're still carrying around, then you're going to see the scary landscape through your wounds and fears. And you don't have to live like that. But you do have to learn how to clean that shit out. And I'm an expert at teaching about that, so join me. This was an interesting question from B. It is personal to her chart, which, as you know, I sort of don't like to do, but
Right.
the question is valuable to anybody who's exploring their chart with regard to where their nodes are placed. And so I thought I would read the question and answer it in the spirit of illuminating something in your chart if you're learning. So B writes, "Hey, Michael and Zoe, I love your show and classes, and with all your knowledge, I'm hoping you can answer this question because there really isn't a lot of information about this anywhere. What does it mean to have your ascendant riding on your south node? I'm a Leo rising, 29 degrees, and have my south node in Leo at 28 degrees. That'll be important in a moment." I had to love this is part of why I'm answering this question, because she says, "Most of the quick blurbs that I've seen about this point indicate an earlier death in life."
Oh my God.
Oh, yeah, she must have been reading Vedic astrology stuff because they're so wildly superstitious.
That's going to scare you.
"My Juno is close by at 3 degrees of Virgo, but not sure if it adds anything into the mix. Thank you so much and all the best, B." I was struck by this question because I'm preparing a class on the nodes of the moon that I'm going to be doing in Amityville Apothecary on Long Island in New York in June.
Wow.
I'm doing my first live teaching. It's been years since I traveled to teach, but they're flying me into New York. I can't wait.
That's huge.
So if you're in New York, kids,
Wow.
the weekend of the solstice, Saturday afternoon, Amityville Apothecary in Amityville, Long Island. I'll be doing a class on the nodes of the moon. So, the nodes of the moon, when they land in a chart, are one of the most important points in the chart. They represent your past entrance into this life, the south node, and your purpose for being in this life, what you're here to move towards, north node. These points are so powerful in terms of reflecting how each individual is to move into their life and through it to their purpose. So when you understand how to work with them a little bit more efficiently, there's a tremendous amount of information built into where the nodes are in your chart and also how they connect to other planets or placements within the chart. Something that I might look for before doing a session is if a person's south node of the moon is conjunct, and I mean closely conjunct, any other planet or point. The interpretation of that is that the native, the person whose chart this is, brings something with them when they come into this life. This is kind of woo-woo, right? We're talking about your past life energy that you bring into this life. You're talking about gifts and talents that are natural to a person because they come in pre-installed with them, but also issues that might be setting a person up to have a certain experience in life karmically might relate or be expressed by a planet or point being very close to the south node. And when I say very close, I mean it's got to be within 2 to 3 degrees at the most in terms of width of orb of influence. So if it's exactly the same, 1 degree away, 2 degrees away, and maybe 3 degrees away, we would say this, that it is so that you bring something with you as you enter this life. I'll give 1 or 2 little minor examples. I've read a lot of people who have their Saturn and their south node conjunct. That's a rough life. That's a life where
The whole
native
life.
says, the whole life
wow.
says, I will come to this life and chew up an enormous chunk of karma.
Wow.
Because we sometimes call Saturn the Lord of Karma, and the south node is the karmic south node. So this is a particular conjunction that I've seen a lot that has this sort of meaning that you're going to chew up a lot more karma than your neighbor. And inevitably, I've never said that to a person who said, "What? What are you talking about?" What I've heard back is like, "God, that makes sense."
They're all, oh,
Right.
yeah.
So now imagine someone has their Mercury, their voice near their south node. That person has words, ideas, thoughts that they are karmically pre-installed with. And their life might reflect having some innate wisdom that comes through them that they can share in their life because of the sort of woo-woo way that they come in with some kind of a presupposed voice. Another little example I always give about myself is that the South Node reflects your gifts that are installed in your body at birth. I'm a singer and very musical. When I sing, the sign that the moon is in changes how it feels to sing for me very dramatically. Like when I was a teenager, I used to have a voice lesson every week, and I was just beside myself at how it felt different to sing each week. And sometimes it was easy, sometimes it was hard. Of course, I know now it's because I'm so impacted by the moon. And when the moon is in Capricorn, my South Node sign, that's when I sing the best. That's when my intonation is sharpest. That's when my ability to improvise is possible. So all of this to say that poor B is here to master herself in this life. So B, here's the rare moment where I give you some direct astrological guidance based on your chart, even though I don't always like to do this. If your karmic South Node is conjunct your rising sign, especially because it's in your 12th house side, right? 28 degrees is 1 degree lower than 29. That means that the rising sign at 29 has the South Node at 28 inside her 12th house. That means that she comes into this life with a kind of persona and way of being in the world that has to be worked on so that by the time she finishes up her life, she's not serving herself as much, but serving others, because her North Node would be just below the 6th house, 7th house cuffs, meaning in the 6th house, the house of being of service. So the conversation that I would want to have with B would be just that, depending on how old she is and where she is in the journey. How have you learned that if you naturally serve yourself, it doesn't work as well as when you learn how to focus on others? And then she would describe what that experience is like for her, and then we would together come up with an interpretation. Right? I can't tell her what it means without her being here to talk about it, outside of saying there's a direct connection between how she's showing up in the world and what she moves towards relationally that is part of her karma. That's why I say she's here to master herself and not the world. So it's an interesting week for the retrograde cycles of all of the 17 planets that are in retrograde right now. I'm kidding. There's only 3, and Mars is direct. You can definitely be like, go forward by examining the past.
Because we're like in the later stages of all the retrogrades.
Well, because what I'm doing for today is, you know how in retrogrades, I sometimes say, look back to this date or that date.
Right.
That's what everything's about this week.
Yeah, great.
It's a very busy week for all of the 17,000 planets that are retrograde. I'm kidding. It's only Mercury and Venus who are still moving backwards in Pisces, and Mars at finally at 23 degrees of Pisces. He's finally moving a little bit, is done with his backward motion, but he's going to treat us to a couple of moments to glance back. We got to glance back to move forward. And that's really the main thrust of this whole week. And there is a larger planetary hit that we move through this week, peaking on Friday. And this is a sextile between Saturn and Uranus. Saturn at 24 Pisces, Uranus at 24 Aries are holding this very productive and efficient 60-degree angle of potential. This will hit again in early August. So this hit reflects things that are happening in the first half of the year, and the summertime hit will reflect everything that's happening in the second half of the year. And this is the transit that's reflecting the wild amounts of fast and sudden change that is causing us to have to bring our A game and our sense of responsibility, or we're going to get lost in the chaos. Now, it's interesting, if this were a personal reading and I was talking about such a transit, I would be talking about the value of the productivity of the transit, because 60-degree angles offer, the potential to do things, make things, and move things. But as a reflection of the world landscape, this transit is why we can see happening out there radical, sudden changes that make us go, holy fuck, what's happening? The Saturn piece is he's demanding that we show up for a world that is changing under our feet. He doesn't give a fuck if we're scared about what's happening. In Pisces, he's asking us to tap into faith in things unseen, so that the seen things that are bumpy don't destroy us as we trip over them. And Uranus, of course, just says, if it's going to happen fast and unexpectedly and out of the blue. So from a world perspective, what's efficiently occurring this year is radical fast change, Uranus, that knocks us on our ass, that we have to find ways to hold, carry, and understand, Saturn. I'll mention this too, because, I'm always learning and moving with the planets to understand what they're going to bring when they bring what they bring. So there was a similarly mild dust up in the end of January, a semi-square between Saturn and Pluto. Only once. It hit on January 26th. The interpretation of it would be like growing pains and the urge for change feeling blocked. And so when I talked about the year ahead, I didn't think January was going to be rough as it was. I thought the summer was going to be so hot and heavy, I assumed that January would be, well, let's just say I didn't think it would be what it was. But once we moved through it, I was able to accurately understand that Saturn and Pluto in a semi-square, which is mild conflict and obstacles, was reflecting out in the world everything that was breaking down as soon as we moved into January. So I would have clocked January as a reasonable month. It even says that in my outline. It says reasonable month. But of course, January was not reasonable.
No.
Right. So, sorry, kids, but we learn as we go. And so what I have to say about this transit this week and the second hit of it in August is, I would have called April a kind of moderate month, but I'm not sure I can stand by that anymore, because A, the last 2, 3, 4 weeks of current events have proven to be wildly destabilizing, because sudden change is something that we have to handle on a Saturnian level. So that just ups the ante for me of how difficult it's going to continue to be to move through all this change. What can I say but repeat again over and over? I think we got this. I believe in our resilience. Yes. And more importantly, the triple retrogrades of Mercury, Venus, and Mars are preparing us on an interior level to handle a more chaotic world, mind, body, and heart. And this week marks a lot of important movement in all three of those cycles. So we're going to be doing some glancing back to figure out how to move through this week and the week ahead. So just a reminder about the power of the birth canal of the zodiac. As the 30th degree of Pisces gives way to 0 Aries, we move across the most sensitive point of all 360 degrees of the ecliptic, the place where the potential and the void and the preform energy, where we are connected to absolutely everything, and where there is no form at all, and Aries, where all form begins with the ram and the fire of the cardinal energy going, hey, I'm here, I am. You're probably bored of me talking about how Neptune and Saturn and Mercury and Venus in the retrogrades are going to cross this three times for Mercury and Venus. And actually 3 times for Saturn and Neptune if you include both this year and next year. But I want to point out for a moment the fact that the north node of the moon has moved into Pisces as we started this year, but the nodes move backwards, right? So the north node of the moon in Pisces isn't in early Pisces. In fact, as we get to like March, April, the north node is at 27 degrees of Pisces. So why this matters is that Neptune connected with the north node before he moved into Aries over the weekend. Saturn will meet up with the north node before entering Pisces in May. Both Mercury and Venus, when they turn around and go direct, will also be crossing over the north node, except this week, both Venus and Mercury conjunct the north node while moving backwards. So let me see if I can convey the importance of this.
Yeah, I'm like trying to think of what that means.
Yeah. I'm trying
Like
to.
north is the future, but they're moving backwards.
Well, let's leave the moving backwards piece out as important because it is significant, but it's not for the sake of this teaching. Don't worry about the fact that it moves backwards. Just understand that it's there at the end of Pisces, kind of holding a light. And the north node can be thought of as a light or a north star or a waypointer. So the backward movement does count because for the last 18 months, the north node was in the sign of Aries, understanding about getting fired up and moving forward. But by moving backwards and dropping into Pisces as we started the year, that's what allowed me and demanded of me to keep saying, everybody, put your spiritual practice first, because it's the only way that I know of how to get through the craziness of this and next year. And so the north node being in Pisces is sort of saying, here's what it looks like, here's what it looks like, here's what it looks like, as each planet joins up with the north node. So if we anthropomorphize it, it's like having a meeting. And a week or so ago, Neptune had a meeting with the north node, and it was very fast. It's like, hey, yeah, we know why we're here. Bye. I'm moving into Aries, and I'm just going to be bringing every bit of my spiritual yumminess into the fires of Aries. I'll see you later. Later on when Saturn does the connecting to the north node, it'll be a similar thing of the teacher getting an imprint of what it means to put your spiritual practice first, so that when he moves into Aries in May, we have shored ourselves up as much as we possibly can to meet the changes of the future with a little more grace. Tomorrow, Tuesday, Venus is going to conjunct the north node of the moon. That's an incredible opportunity to tap into your emotional body And with your mental body, thinking about things like your relationship dynamics and how you relate to finances, and examine where you feel your life going. Because she's retrograde, we can look back to February 1st. That's the first time that Venus conjuncted the North Node. And so if you look back to those couple of days as January was becoming February, if anything visible rose up in your emotional life or your relationship life or your financial experience, you can count on this week bringing a kind of another layer of that storyline.
Can you give an example of that?
Oh, great question. Yes.
Because like I feel like I like what you're saying and I'm interested in this and like I'm almost there and putting that together.
Okay.
But
Okay. No, I love it. And you're the voice of the people who are listening. So I love that you're asking. So
yeah,
Venus is love. The North Node is the future.
right.
And so one might think that on February 1st, some people out there will experience Venus on the North Node as reflecting something new rising up in the world of love.
Okay.
So let's just say you're in the market, you're meeting people and, looking to date, and somehow at the end of January, February, something happened that was interesting to you in the dating world. And say you met up with somebody and it's playing itself out. The Venus retrograde going to take that relationship story to someplace interesting because she's down below. And then this week would hearken back to the movement in love that was happening around February 1st.
Got it. Okay.
This is sort of what we always mean when I say look back to the date of. And I want to say this too, and I say this as often as I can when I'm verbalizing this, but it's like, don't look too hard.
Right.
Like it's either there and obvious or it ain't there. Don't look too hard. That's trying too hard with the intellect to shove something into, to fit. Similarly, though, I want to say on Thursday, Mercury's going to do this too. So here's an example of Mercury. March 1st was when this one first hit. Because Mercury is about thoughts, perceptions, and conversations. And when Mercury hit the North Node on March 1st, it was like he was already aware that a retrograde was coming. So you might have had an important conversation in early March about your plans for the future. Well, then Mercury goes retrograde and Mars and Venus go retrograde. There's all kinds of shit show changes in plans. You want to look for a similar conversation around the end of this week that might be a continuation of things that rose up around March 1st. And of course, both of these transits wrap up a third time in April. So we're still in process, not at result or at the end of things. And if you look back at those dates and it isn't your story that a clear narrative is connecting you from those dates to now, as we move through the week, I want you to ruminate on the idea of, is my heart in the same place as my mind? Am I thinking thoughts that I feel strongly about? Am I aligning what I want to share with how I deeply feel? And am I putting my spiritual practice first, both in my mind and my heart? Because Mercury and Venus conjunct the North Node is also asking us to move forward in our mind, led by spirit, and in our hearts, led by spirit. And I promise you all more grace under fire as the months ahead play out because of what Venus and Mercury are doing now. Now, Friday is a big day for Mars. Mars is in his direct shadow, meaning he's shadowing over territory he's covered twice before. He's wrapping things up. And two transits that hit on different days as they arose both complete their third and final hit on Friday. One is a trine from Mars to Saturn, and the other one is a sextile from Mars to Uranus. Both of these transits are what we would call positive geometry. And certainly the square from Mars to Chiron was the triple transit responsible for all of the difficulty and the exhaustion and the headaches and the illnesses and all of the ways that Mars not moving much was challenging to our bodies. But these two transits are about responsibility and sudden change. And I hope you're noticing that this is the week that Saturn and Uranus sextile each other. And so Mars on Friday is touching into that sextile very positively by trining Saturn and sextiling Uranus. So everything that I talked about at the top of the episode, kids, about how wild the year is for sudden change and our karmic demand from Saturn to be able to contain it with some discipline, responsibility, and sobriety, the energy that we move through this weekend is finishing up Mars's action on you as it relates to allowing things to change and meeting the changing landscape with some grounded, well, I don't know if I can say ease, but like a grounded sense of, I can meet this. I must meet this. Like no one gets to sit this year out.
Yes.
Now, these two didn't start out together. They're just finishing together. The trine from Saturn, so reflecting events and inner shifts that are very much about discipline, responsibility, and taking care of business at every level, hit on September 29th, and then again on February 9th. And the wrap-up is Friday. So with this glancing back to move forward, you want to take a look at the things of discipline and responsibility and a willingness to meet life on life's terms. And if a narrative rose up at the end of September and the second week of February, you can expect Friday to contain similar themes. Then the other piece, this sextile to Uranus, that's reflecting wacky, wild, sudden change. Because Mars is a physicalized planet. He reflects things that are happening with our bodies and in the world of form. And Uranus can change anything like lightning. So October 24th of last year, January 23rd, are moments of fast, sudden, unstable change that came easily that might have hit those dates. So as you move through Friday, I want you to ask yourself the question, do I feel ready? Am I clear about what I want to accomplish in the year ahead with my goals and ambitions? Have I tempered what my goals and ambitions are to meet the demands of a world that has a greater need of a certain kind of service? Now, we still have Mars's trine to Neptune that increased our capacity to tap into spirit. And then from Leo, we have the opposition of Mars to Pluto. So we still have a couple of wrap-ups from Mars as the month plays out, which will also coincide with Mercury and Venus turning around. So again, I don't think April is going to be quite as dainty as I originally thought. Lots to think about as the week ends. There's an interesting opportunity on Sunday. This connects to both Mars in his retrograde cycle wrap-up and Mercury and Venus in their backward journey. When we talk about Mars and Venus as a kind of dynamic duo, we're talking about the masculine principle and the feminine principle as it lives in us at the personal level. So in the world of embodiment, it's the physical body and the emotional body. But from an archetypal perspective, where we sort of anthropomorphize the planets to have a greater understanding of their intentions as they move, we go back to that masculine feminine principle, which we all want to have some experience of balance in, so that we are doing in equal measure with our being, that we allow for our creative expression without trampling on it with too much busyness, that we can love and act both and borrow from both, so we find the middle way where we have a little bit of masculine, a little bit of feminine in some sort of balance. So the best balancing transit would be a trine, a triangle. 120 degrees means both parties are singing at the top of their lungs. So on Sunday, Mars at 25 degrees of Cancer is going to trine Venus at 25 degrees of Pisces retrograde. Now, this, of course, can't be a triple transit because Mars and Venus are personal planets. They're moving fast. They're both sort of slow down and backward moving. So there's never going to be a triple transit from a personal planet retrograding with another personal planet. But the fact that smack dab in the middle of all of their cycles, that Mars and Venus meet up, while Mars is direct, but Venus is still turned within, what an opportunity to have the love that Venus knows when she's in Pisces, which is limitless, unconditional, pure, because it comes from the idea that we are all one and that we are all connected, and that love, forgiveness, compassion, and empathy spill out love to all corners of consciousness when Venus is in Pisces. And so Mars, angry as fuck in Cancer, sort of over the weekend looks back at his beloved who's in a process, and she says, honey, love more. Bring more softness to your experience. I can't go with you right now. I'm busy. Nice to see you. It's like a fast fuck. They've met up for the weekend to have sex. And as they do, she's attempting to pour love, forgiveness, compassion, and empathy into Mars's sort of marching orders. On Sunday as well, the Sun and Jupiter will be in a sextile. That means the day itself has this stunning sense of like what's possible and expansive manifestation desires, like conscious awareness of the Sun touching off with Jupiter in 60 degrees is like to be able to see all the possibilities you might create and then some. So if you put these two things together, Mars direct is getting a download of love in an atmosphere of possibility, and he'll take that with him forward as he continues to wrap up his cycle. And Venus will take the meeting back with her deeper into Pisces, tapping us more directly into that love and compassion.
So it's kind of like a reflective end to a active week.
Absolutely. It's a perfect way of putting it, because I do want you to do a lot of reflecting this week. And Friday certainly merits it, and so does Sunday. Now, I'll give you some interesting dates to look at. January 25th, Mars and Venus trined each other, but not part of her retrograde cycle. On May 21st, they'll do this again outside of her retrograde cycle. So this Sunday is kind of like an extra. When we signed up for this retrograde shit show, there was a bonus that maybe we didn't know about. And it's this weekend's ability to self-reflect, to take stock, and to allow more love, compassion, forgiveness, and empathy to enter how you choose to move about the world. Now that's plenty for one episode, kids. I know. I mean, this is definitely an episode you needed your pen and pencil. So I hope you weren't driving. One last thing to mention is, well, I'll mention this as well. In that Venus trine Mars on Sunday, Mercury is conjunct Venus. So our mind and perception is part of Sunday's trine, and so is Saturn. Saturn and Venus are exactly conjunct. And so we've talked about the Mars and Saturn exact hit on Friday, but Sunday he's still close enough that it's a big-ass trine from Mars to not only Venus, but Mercury and Saturn. But Mercury's going to go direct the very next day. So when you and I meet next week, kids, the first thing that I'll be talking about is the fact that Mercury will have just gone direct. Sometimes when Mercury turns around, that can be a little bit cranky. So don't be surprised if Sunday and Monday you're feeling some kind of way. In the world of cranky, that might be Mercury stationing and turning around. But once we get to next week, kids, that's one less backward moving personal planet to trip us up. Have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. This week we have an email-in dream. And Michael, actually, we've been getting emails from people whose dreams have been read on the podcast. Yeah, we've gotten like a couple emails in the past week of folks saying, oh my God, I heard my dream while I was listening to the podcast. And
fun.
First of all, they were excited, but they were saying, this is spot on.
Oh, yay, yay. Because, it's always a little hard to know.
Right, like if we don't have their feedback.
Yeah. That's very valid.
While you're interpreting. Yeah, but it was so interesting. There's one from February about moving to the UK, and then there was one from earlier this month about marriage, but it was like the theme was marriage, but the deeper meaning was a sense of control.
Yeah, that sounds familiar too. All right, well, yay. Thank you, dreamers. Keep them coming.
For this week's email and dream, it's coming from Julia, and it's a little bit sad. A little bit sad and a little bit odd. So Julia says, hi there, Michael. I hope you're doing well. I had this dream about a month ago, the night of my partner's birthday. I'd love your guidance. It felt huge, and I didn't know what to make of it. Okay, here's the dream. I gave birth to a girl. My partner and I came home, and I was watching the baby breathe. I was very happy and affectionate, taking the baby in. You're so cute. And then the baby said, so cute. My partner was working at a desk with his back towards me, facing a computer, and we had a dog. I walked out of that room and briefly through another room, then into the next, where there was a second dog. It started attacking me, and it wouldn't stop biting my wrists and barking and lunging at me. I put the baby on my back and called for my partner. After a bit, I said, John, I need you to put down what you're doing and come here now. He said I was about to come, but before he got there, I took the baby off my back because the dog bit me. The baby stopped breathing. It was still. I breathed into her, and her eyes were green and lit up with life. I was hopeful and desperate, but she did not start breathing again, and she died.
Oh,
My
wow.
best, Julia.
Now, of course, this is a dream where I really wish we had the dreamer, because to me, the dream has to be reflecting issues in the relationship.
Yeah.
Partly because the dream happened the evening of her partner's birthday. And when people are in relationship, the birthdays of partners are significant. And in some ways, considering that Julie's having a dream that's reflecting some stuff on the inside, the interesting storyline at a partner's birthday, for my money, would be the partner, not the birthday person.
What is like, obviously the baby is like coming together, collaborating,
Yes.
creating new life.
Yes.
And this is, she must be thinking about this, you know, in her partnership.
Well, yes, babies, that could be part of the issue. Do you notice, how there's like binaries everywhere in this dream? You're so cute, the baby echoes cute. The partner is there, but he's facing away, captivated by escapism, the computer, not paying attention to Julia. There's two dogs, a sort of relaxed dog and the agitated dog that clearly wants something different. And it's interesting that the passive, quiet dog is with the boyfriend or the partner who's looking away, right?
Yeah.
So it's like that scene was interesting, that like there's this symbol of love, because that's what dogs and cats are. So there's this symbol of love that is gentle and quiet, but it comes with a partner that's captivated by other things. So that's an interesting dynamic in the dream that I would love to have some feedback from Julia, including the idea of like, where does she land on the literal idea of baby? Of course, we're assuming she's, cis heterosexual woman, with a man. Does she indicate anything about her age or her gender preferences, or
No.
just a partner? Okay.
I have no, just a partner, and the partner is named John, so I'm assuming
All right, John.
male.
Okay. So the birth to a girl is immediate, right? The dream isn't about having a baby where it'd be like, okay, something got initiated recently. The dream is right there, right now. Julia is trying to birth something new. So I'm wondering if the evening and the birthday party didn't trigger something in Julia to be in consideration of like what she's creating in her life. And maybe literally, what am I creating with John? What are we generating in our partnership? And so there's this birth to a baby girl that I think is representing Julia's desires for some quality of connection with John. I mean, even watching the baby to see its breathing is one of those funny little anxiety behaviors that new parents might engage in that is both a kind of joyful celebration of the preciousness of their little life, as well as like the terror that it might stop breathing and like cease to exist. So the fact that we hear, the order with which I receive information counts. And so the fact that I hear this idea that Julia's in this numinous moment of perceiving this really lovely expression of new possibility, and it's responding to her, it's echoing. You're so cute, so cute. That's called echoing. Relationships need echoing and mirroring to proceed well. Partners need to feel that they're being attended to and looked at by and considered by their partners. And echoing would be one of those active listening things where you might or repeat a word to active listeningly, reflect the connection. But the partner's looking at the computer.
It's the baby, not the partner.
Right. So the baby is captivating, but the partner's not available. And so the fact that she walks out of the room and into one and then a third one tells me that there's indeed a demand. The psyche is saying, you got to find something. It's not in this room. It's not in the room where you're fantasizing about how cute and wonderful this is. It's in a room that's going to illuminate more. So it's in that third room, and no surprise there, 3. 3 is the dynamic creativity number in numerology. So she gets to the third room, the Goldilocks room, and she gets the information that the dream is offering, that some relationship to love and the idea of unconditional love wants something from Julia. But it doesn't go well, right? So the attempt to get John to come and help, and he doesn't, right? He says, I was about to.
Right.
That to me is what puts the negative expression of the dog attack has got to do with something around John's unavailability, because he's unavailable all through this dream. We put a baby on our back when we have to do something or accomplish something, right? So that becomes the sort of nugget for me. A wrestle with what love looks like in a primal way, dog trying to get Julia to take him for a walk or something. Plus, John not being available to help, then this attempt to breathe life back into this infant that is passing is sort of Julia's private work to keep something alive that clearly on some level wants to die. The green eyes are interesting. First of all, green eyes are like the eyes of jealousy, right? Jealousy is sort of a green emotion.
Jealousy.
There's just a lot in the media about jealousy and green being related. And it is colloquial to say, that like someone seeing green might be seeing something through the eyes of jealousy. But I also have to add that green is the color of the heart chakra. And that this baby, this cute new baby, has to be about love more than jealousy in some ways, unless there's a jealous dynamic between Julia and John. But I think she might have said something if there was.
Yeah, that would have been more apparent.
So, Julia, because you're not here, I don't want you to think that I'm imagining that this dream means your relationship is over or needs to end. It could be a kind of emotional recalibration after spending an evening of celebrating John. There might have been a need for you in your dream life to sort of lift your experience up, but the fact that it had big feels and seemed huge counts. So to wrap up, Julie's dreaming about something new that she wants to generate with her partner. Somehow, at least in Julia's unconscious, there's some feelings that the partner may not be as invested because he shows up in the dream as disconnected and not invested in this new, delightful, cute consciousness that Julia's creating. And I think the dream is asking her to consider, what does love feel like? What does partnership feel like? It's interesting that she uses the word partner and then has a dream that reflects non-partnering.
Yeah.
So that contradiction is in there, Julia. I don't know to what level it's reflecting something challenging in your relationship, but I think it's certainly reflecting some form of emotional ambivalence about something, and it's definitely worth a deeper look.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.